Continuing our reading in The World and Thorinn by Damon Knight. Today is Chapter 1, Section 2. The flea lay upon his back, hands behind his head, the knee of his good leg cocked over the other. His left leg was shorter than the right, and had always been so. He could grip a horse with his thighs well enough, but when he was afoot, the bad leg was too feeble to bear his weight for more than a moment, and so he hopped everywhere. Though Goriot's sons always said the short leg was good for walking on the hillside, so long as he took care to go with his shins. The blades of yellow grass formed a wall close around him, shielding his body from the wind that rustled overhead. Through half-shut eyes he could see the wavering patch of brightness that was the sky. Drowsy scents of grass and blossoms were in his nostrils, mingled with the faint but pungent smell of horse that clung to his leather garments. He could hear the still, stiff grass blades crackling as insects crawled upon them, the snort and stamp of the horses further up the hillside, and more distantly the unending drone of Snorri's pipe. Deliciously hidden and at ease, more than half asleep, he was daydreaming of distant mountains and brightly dressed people, when a new sound roused him. He started up on one elbow, listened. There it came again. He pivoted with one hand on the matted grasses, sprang up. Far below, over the thousand moving waves of yellow grass, he could see Goriot's steeding in the bright half of the valley. The house with its roof of gray stone and its thread of smoke bent by the wind, the horse barn, the meat house, the tanyard, the well, all tiny as pebbles. Near the house a mannikin stood. Its mane was only a dot of yellow. The arms were lifted. It shook a fist. After a second, the hail came again. Ore! Thorinn waved his arm in answer. The tiny figure gestured with one hand, then turned away. It was already loping slowly toward the house when the sound arrived. Down. They had thought of some other task for him. That was only to be expected. Breathing the keen wind, Thorinn forgot all disappointment as he raised his head. It was mid-morning, and where the tip of the pipe touched the sky beyond the valley rim, the dome was split by a clean arc that soared over Thorinn's head, dividing the sky into pale light and greenish darkness. Half the valley below was daylit, the other half still in deep night, pricked here and there by the witch fires of fallen sky stuff. Over in the peat bog, wisps of night mist were rising like ghosts. Dew still sparkled in the grass along the daylight edge. As the day wore on, the arc of the sky would creep around the rim of the valley. One could almost see it move. Thorinn had lain many an hour on the windswept hill, watching it, until he fell fast asleep and the horses roamed where they would. Tits and fieldfares were busy in the cropped grass around the spring, quarreling and chirping over the bits of grain they found in the horse droppings. Hawks were awheel over the high rim, but in the dark side. Thorinn knew owls and night jares were stirring. Northward from Hovenstar, it was said, there were night creatures that never ventured into the daylight, but followed the darkness eternally, round and round. Someday Thorinn would go and hunt them. Goriot would give him leave when he was a man. The world was good, though Snorri rumbled. Above him, near the outcrop in the spring, the 11 giant horses turned their heads alertly. Thorinn filled his lungs and shouted, "Ho, Bitter! Ho, Stonehead!" The horses snorted, tossed their manes. Stonehead, the old stallion, showed his wicked teeth. Thorinn bent his knee, leaped over the grass tops alighted 2 ells higher on the slope, leaped again. The horses, pretending fright, wheeled and lumbered away. Thorn's leg pumped furiously. He bounded, leaped like a grasshopper after the soaring horses. He passed 2 stragglers, nervous young colts. The earth trembled, bouncing him higher. Blood burned in his veins. The wind whipped his cheeks, made his eyes smart with tears. Head down, his massive hindquarters bunched like fists. Old Stonehead flew before. Stones and clots of turf spattered Thornton like hail. He was flying, lungs afire, into the yellow sea and out. Ahead, the stallion's round eye glinted. The old horse turned, laboring up slope. In 2 breaths, Thornton was beside him. A final leap, and the rough mane was against his face. His arms and thighs gripped the shaggy neck, while the world wheeled. Winded and utterly happy, Thornton clung to the stallion's neck. After a plunge or two, earth and sky steadied around him. Obedient to his will, the old stallion, who could have flung him 5 ells if he chose, stood snorting and trembling. Thornton reached up, grasped a thick, hairy ear at the root, pulled gently. The stallion dipped his huge head, turned, and sprang. The other horses, standing at gaze a few 100 ells away, fell upward into distance. The steep yellow bowl of the valley came plunging up. The wind whinnied in his ears, down, with a bone-breaking jolt. Another leap, down, another. Bounding below, the tiny shapes of the houses grew larger with each dizzy arc. The stallion's neck strained against Thornton's cheek. They were flying like the wind. They would leap and never come down. The descent grew shallow. The hillside was behind them. Now they were bounding across the level earth toward the stone-roofed house and the gray figure beside it. Thornton recognized Withinga, tall as the house eaves, in his stained leather jerkin and his belt studded with metal bosses. Obedient to Thornton's touch, Stonehead planted his hooves, slid to a bone-jarring halt. While Withinga watched, Thornton vaulted to the ground, slapped the old stallion's rump. Stonehead snorted, wheeled and bounded away toward the distant shapes of the other horses high on the hill. And that's the end of section 2.